20 secret US science projects so bizarre, they sound like something ripped straight out of a cartoon. Imagine the CIA wiring up cats to spy on the Soviets, or the military strapping tiny firebombs to bats during World War II. Scientists even sketched out spaceships powered by nuclear bomb explosions. Sounds like pure fiction, right? Well, every single one of these experiments was real. And today, we're diving into the dumbest, weirdest, and most unbelievable projects in US history. 1. In the 1960s, the CIA decided their best spies weren't men in trench coats, but cats. They surgically implanted microphones and tiny transmitters into real cats, hoping they could sneak close to Soviet officials. The project, called Acoustic Kitty, cost millions of dollars, but the very first test went horribly wrong. The spy cat was released on the street and got run over by a taxi within minutes. The project was immediately canceled, making it one of the dumbest and most expensive fails in spy history. 2. During World War II, the US military dreamed up a plan straight out of a cartoon. Bat bombs. Scientists strapped tiny incendiary devices onto bats, thinking they'd roost in Japanese rooftops and burn down entire cities when the bombs went off. On paper, it sounded genius. In reality, the bats were unpredictable. Some even set fire to a US base during testing. Unsurprisingly, the project was abandoned. Turns out, weaponizing bats wasn't quite the secret to victory. 3. What do you do when radar isn't advanced enough to guide missiles? If you're B.F. Skinner, a famous psychologist, you turn to pigeons. He trained the birds to peck at images of enemy targets, which would steer the missile in the right direction. The project was seriously funded, and believe it or not, the pigeons actually did a decent job. But when electronic guidance caught up, the idea of pigeon-piloted bombs was dropped. Still, the thought of a war being decided by pecking birds is both hilarious and terrifying. 4. In the 1960s, the US Army came up with a secret plan called Project Iceworm. The idea? Build a massive network of tunnels under the ice in Greenland to hide 600 nuclear missiles aimed at the Soviet Union. Soldiers actually lived in the frozen tunnels for testing, but they quickly discovered the ice wasn't stable. It kept shifting, crushing the structures. After spending millions, the project was abandoned. Turns out, hiding nukes in a melting glacier wasn't the best long-term strategy. 5. What's the best way to power a spaceship? According to some US scientists in the 1950s, the answer was nuclear bombs. Project Orion proposed launching a spacecraft by detonating a series of nuclear explosions underneath it, literally riding a wave of blasts into space. On paper, it could have worked, but the environmental dangers were off the charts. Imagine nuclear fallout raining back down just to get astronauts into orbit. Unsurprisingly, the project never left the drawing board, but it remains one of the boldest and craziest space ideas in US history. 6. Not all secret projects involve weapons. Some involve sandwiches. In the 1960s, the US Army developed a sandwich in a can. Imagine opening a tin and pulling out a soggy, pre-made sandwich that had been sitting for months. It was supposed to solve the problem of soldiers carrying fresh food. Instead, it was a culinary nightmare. Soldiers hated it. The bread turned to mush, and the idea was quickly scrapped. Turns out, not everything belongs in a can. 7. In the Vietnam War, the US military secretly experimented with cloud seeding. The idea? Spray chemicals into clouds to make them produce rain, hoping to flood enemy supply routes. The project was called Operation Popeye. Yes, like the cartoon sailor. It worked sometimes, but it was unpredictable, expensive, and controversial. While it made a few muddy roads, it never changed the course of the war. Mother Nature isn't so easy to boss around. 8. Before Area 51 became famous, the Air Force had another strange obsession: UFOs. From 1952 to 1969, Project Blue Book investigated thousands of UFO sightings across America. Agents interviewed witnesses, analyzed strange lights, and filed reports that sometimes read like science fiction. In the end, most cases were explained as weather balloons, aircraft, or plain imagination. But a few remain unexplained, fueling UFO conspiracy theories to this day. 9. In the 1950s, scientists actually built prototypes of flying aircraft carriers. Imagine a massive plane in the sky carrying smaller fighter planes inside, then launching them mid-air like a scene from a superhero movie. The idea worked in tests. Planes did fly out and dock back in, but it was too risky and too expensive to maintain. The project was canceled, but the footage looks like something out of the Avengers. 10. Forget laser weapons. In the 1960s, some US scientists thought the future of war was sound. They experimented with enormous speakers and sound cannons, powerful enough to knock people over or even make them sick. The sonic weapon project showed promise, but the devices were huge, unreliable, and often deafened the people using them. It turns out blasting your enemies with the world's loudest concert wasn't the smartest battle plan. 11. Sometimes the US Navy used food for science. In one bizarre test, engineers filled giant tanks with molasses, yes, molasses, to simulate the flow of thick fuel inside battleships. The slow, sticky liquid gave them a way to study how fuel would slosh and affect stability. It worked for science, but to outsiders it looked like sailors were just swimming in syrup. It may have been one of the stickiest experiments in naval history. 12. Not all experiments stayed on land. In the 1950s, the Navy dreamed up the idea of an underwater aircraft carrier. They wanted massive submarines capable of launching airplanes straight from beneath the ocean. Designs were made, blueprints drawn, but the cost and complexity were staggering. While the project never got built, just imagine fighter jets blasting off from under the waves. It sounds more like a James Bond film than a military plan. 13. In the late 1950s, the Army cooked up Project Horizon, a plan to build a permanent military base on the moon. They wanted to ship men, materials, and even nuclear weapons to Earth's satellite, turning the moon into the ultimate high ground. The project never left the drawing board, partly because of cost, partly because of the dangers. But the fact that US generals once wanted soldiers stationed on the moon feels like the ultimate sci-fi twist in Cold War history. 14. Long before drones became common, NASA engineers sketched out something wild: blimps floating across the surface of Mars. The Mars Blimp Project proposed sending inflatable airships to glide over the red planet and capture data. It sounds ridiculous, but it was actually cheaper and simpler than building rovers at the time. The plan was shelved, but the thought of a giant floating balloon drifting across Mars still feels like a cartoon idea that almost came true. 15. In the 1960s, engineers tested a bizarre contraption nicknamed the flying bedstead. It was basically a vertical platform with jets underneath, a kind of flying lawn chair. Pilots strapped themselves in and hovered awkwardly above the ground. While it looked ridiculous, the tests helped develop vertical takeoff technology, later used in advanced jets. It may have looked like a wobbly death trap, but the flying bedstead actually paved the way for modern aircraft. 16. In the Cold War, the US tried something called Project West Forward. Scientists launched 480 million tiny copper needles into orbit to act as a giant space antenna for military communications. It worked briefly, but left behind a dangerous ring of space junk. Imagine surrounding Earth with a glittering halo of metal needles just to make a phone call. 17. In the 1940s, the Army tested a bizarre weapon nicknamed the wind cannon. It was a giant barrel that fired compressed air blasts so powerful they could supposedly knock planes out of the sky. On the ground, it could shatter windows and dent boards, but it never brought down an aircraft. Turns out, isn't much of a bullet. 18. In the 1960s, US researchers developed a chemical called Who Me, a stink spray designed to embarrass enemies. When sprayed, it gave off a foul smell so horrible that it lingered for days. The plan was to use it on enemy soldiers to make them social outcasts. The science was real, but the odor was so unbearable even US troops refused to use it. 19. During World War II, the Navy created a massive floating airstrip called the Habakkuk Project. It wasn't made of steel, but of ice mixed with wood pulp. This Pykrete ship was supposed to survive torpedoes and serve as an unsinkable carrier. They actually built a prototype in Canada, and it lasted for months before melting. Imagine fighting a war on an ice cube the size of Manhattan. 20. In the 1950s, scientists seriously tested the gay bomb, a non-lethal chemical weapon meant to make enemy soldiers suddenly irresistible to each other. The idea was that it would disrupt morale by creating chaos in the ranks. It never got past the research stage, but the fact that US funding ever went into a love potion bomb makes it one of the strangest projects in military history. From spy cats and bat bombs to nuclear spaceships, history is packed with US science projects so wild they sound impossible. But here's the twist. Every single one of them was real. And it makes you wonder, what strange experiments are happening right now that we won't learn about for another 50 years?